remarks relative to today's meeting, I'd like to offer sort of a side comment because I found this to be very interesting to hear the sequence of presentations, in particular because of the interpretation that I had from the title of the meeting and my interactions with Carol Lynn. I'm a newcomer to this group of individuals by and large, and I'll mention a little bit about the background I bring to this, but I'd like to just reference the title for today's meeting: E-Learning Tools and Partnerships Used by Professor Emeriti to Facilitate Teaching and Learning Among Older Adults and Their Families. Some illustrative examples. And the reason I wanted to mention that is, as I just said, in listening to the presentations, it suddenly struck me that, as always, there was a problem with words. And the e-learning word, to me, is a source of what I was confused about a little bit, and that is the following, and perhaps this won't clarify it for everybody, but we can talk about it later. E-learning, it seems to me, can be taken in two contexts. One is the learning people do when they network together in professional networking organizations and meetings and so forth, kind of like a very higher level seminar where people, there may be an expert, but everybody around the table is an expert. And the second segment or interpretation of e-learning that I am focusing on and have focused on in my remarks in the paper that is available is what I'll just term a student-teacher relationship in terms of the learning process that's involved in the kind of interactions. So with that, let me just shift to what remarks I had planned for my paper. And as I say, my discussant remarks today are in response to what I take as three components in the title of today's meeting, namely e-learning tools and partnerships, namely the applications and websites that have been empowered through the internet and the World Wide Web. Professors Emeriti, which I was looking at in terms of content being provided, and that could be content either in a professional networking context or in a teacher-student relationship. And then finally, the third element is older adults and their families, which would be the user community in the context that I'm addressing this. And as I said, my perspective today and on these three components as I've interpreted them and how they factor into the various elements and processes related to e-learning are shaped by my background and experience. And that includes a decade in the academic world, several decades of work in for-profit information technology research and development.
Yeah, I'm recording it.
And a decade of involvement most recently in the field of germ technology. And that's in the context of how older adults interact with and can benefit from information-related technologies. My paper pulls together these perspectives in the context of a conceptual framework, and that framework is intended to highlight intersectional factors that impact e-learning, again, in the latter sense of a teacher-student relationship. Classical learning processes, as I see it. And I highlight these factors and the resulting conceptual framework in my paper, and that's available thanks to Jose Grecar and his eRegions.eu portal on the Professors Emeriti network page. You'll find all of the papers. If you have trouble finding it there, send me an email. I think my email is in the agenda, and I'll forward a copy to you. And if you'd like to discuss any further my remarks here, please reach out to me by email. So the paper is only 700 words. You can read it in less than 10 minutes. And to save time, I'm going to skip over the details of that and save time at the same time for the Q&A portion, which will be an important part of this meeting. So I'd just like to touch on two graphics that summarize the key points that I'm trying to make in this paper. And let me just bring up my Now, is that viewable in its full form by everybody? Anyway, I'll just proceed, assuming you can see most of it. If not, you can refer to it in the paper. And again, this conceptual framework for an e-learning process, and it involves what I call the e-platforms and the 4 C's, to make it very brief. I reflect my engineering background: content, cost, convenience, and confidence. Content, which is where I saw the e-Professor Emeriti network playing in, along with others who can contribute in the traditional educational sense to provide information and knowledge to people, hopefully a little bit of wisdom perhaps in the process. Cost, which is a key factor in creating the tools and platforms that can be then used to make available the content to the users. Convenience, which I mean user friendliness, and that's the big factor in terms of, as you'll see in the paper, a survey that was done and published in a paper from the Association of Computing Machinery, based on a survey in Scotland, identified factors, the driving factor of which was purposeful non-use of digital technologies by older adults for various reasons. The middle block here, which I designate as platforms, I've included to indicate that the development of tools and applications and so forth then have to be made available for people to access. And the organizations that I've highlighted are ones that I'm familiar with. I'm not very familiar with Curac and other like organizations, but the IFA, AARP, and the Encore Network, and there are others, have as their very sophisticated websites opportunities to post links to various kinds of learning platforms. And that's the point that I wanted to leave you with on that. Beyond the platforms that provide direct access to learning applications and tools, distribution of opportunities is a key factor, and that's where the confidence and trust factor plays in. And what I'm trying to get at there is there are certain organizations, particularly as you go to the global population, that people are familiar with, ranging from public libraries to secondary schools to colleges, universities, and so forth. And my concluding slide is this one, which I've taken from the International Federation of Library Associations based in the Netherlands. And it shows the over 250,000 public libraries around the world. And I think in Canada, there are somewhere between 5,000 and 10,000, and in the United States, between 10,000 and 15,000 libraries. Now, accessing and collaborating with these libraries, as is always the case with organizations and individuals, can get rather complicated. But I think those kinds of outreach to trusted organizations to make learning processes and tools available to people is very important. So with that, I will stop my screen share